Medical Officer Zex'Tral of the Praxian Medical Corps had seen a lot of things in his 15 cycles of service aboard the United Species Alliance battlecruiser, Inevitable Operation. He'd treated plasma burns on Vulgorian skin flaps, removed parasitic organisms from the complicated digestive systems of krill diplomats, and once spent 6 consecutive hours untangling the neural tendrils of a juvenile Medusan after an unfortunate encounter with a revolving door. But nothing, absolutely nothing in his extensive training had prepared him for humans. The war against the Harvester Collective was in its 3rd standard year, and the Alliance had been steadily losing ground until the humans joined 6 months ago. These strange bipedal mammals from a backwater system had somehow turned the tide, bringing with them bizarre military tactics, incomprehensible idioms, and medical practices that made Zex's 4 hearts simultaneously seize with horror. Officer Zex'Tral, please report to Emergency Bay 3. Human casualties incoming. The announcement echoed through the pristine medical bay, causing Zex's silvery skin to ripple with apprehension. The medical officer exhaled slowly through his dorsal breathing slits and gathered his composure. His 6-fingered hands automatically checked his instrument belt as he moved toward Emergency Bay 3. Prepare the human-specific medical protocols, he instructed his assistant, Nix, a spider-like arachnoid with exceptional dexterity and an unfortunate tendency to build webs in storage closets when stressed. Which ones? Nix clicked nervously, antennae twitching. The ones they approved or the ones they actually need? Both, the Zex sighed. And activate the translator matrix. Last time I couldn't understand half of what they were saying. Something about walking it off when their tibias were clearly fractured. The bay doors hissed open, revealing a trio of human soldiers supporting a 4th between them. The injured human Jenkins, according to his uniform, had what appeared to be a gaping hole in his shoulder. Dark red blood soaked the fabric around the wound. What happened? Zex asked, trying to keep his voice calm and professional while his tertiary heart began beating erratically with alarm. Harvester Hunter Killer Drone, responded one of the humans, a female named Rodriguez. Caught us on patrol. Plasma round went straight through Jenkins here. Got the bastard, though, Jenkins added, with what humans called a grin. A baring of teeth that inexplicably didn't indicate aggression in their species. Blew its circuits with my sidearm before I went down. Zex couldn't understand how the human was conscious, let alone talking, and was he actually laughing now? Please place the patient on the diagnostic bed immediately, Zex instructed, gesturing with 3 of his upper limbs. We need to stabilize him before. Nah, just need a quick patch, Jenkins interrupted. Got more bugs to kill out there. What? Zex's translator must be malfunctioning. You have a severe plasma wound that has compromised multiple muscle groups and possibly your skeletal structure. You require immediate surgery and at least 14 cycles of regenerative therapy. The humans exchanged looks that Zex had come to recognize as their silly alien doctor expression. Doc, said the 3rd human, a broad-shouldered individual called Ortega, we've got a situation developing in Sector 4. Just do your quick fix thing so we can get back out there. There is no quick fix thing for a wound of this severity. Zex's voice modulator rose to a pitch that made Nick skitter backward. The patient requires. Jenkins reached into a pocket with his good arm and pulled out a small cylinder. Got my own quick fix, Doc. Just need some of that fancy bandage stuff afterward. Before Zex could react, Jenkins pressed the cylinder against his wound and activated it. A hissing sound filled the air, followed by the unmistakable smell of burning human flesh. Jenkins clenched his teeth but made no sound as the crude device cauterized his wound. Zex felt all 4 of his hearts stop simultaneously. There, Jenkins said, pocketing the spent cauterizer. Now just slap some of those heal patches on it, and I'll be good to go. Medical Officer Zex'Tral, 15-cycle veteran of the Praxian Medical Corps, accomplished xenobiologist, and holder of 6 advanced degrees in comparative physiology, did something he had never done before in his professional career. He fainted. Completely unprofessional behavior. Just how they do things, sir. Barbaric practice that could have led to infection, neural damage, or even necrosis. Zex regained consciousness to the sound of arguing voices. His vision cleared to reveal Commander Zex'Tral, the ship's Praxian executive officer, looming over him. Behind the commander stood the three uninjured humans, looking simultaneously concerned and amused. "Medical officer," the commander said sternly, "explain yourself." Zex pushed himself up on his secondary limbs, his primary hands instinctively checking his medical scanner for damage. "Sir, I witnessed the human soldier applying a primitive thermal cauterization device directly to an open plasma wound. The shock of observing such medical malpractice temporarily overwhelmed my neural capacities." Commander Zex'Tral's expression remained stern, but his skin rippled with a subtle pattern that indicated embarrassment among their species. "The humans inform me that this is standard battlefield procedure for their kind," he said carefully. "Apparently they consider our medical protocols inefficient." Rodriguez stepped forward, her face arranged in what humans called a diplomatic expression. "No disrespect intended, Medical Officer Zex'Tral," she said. "It's just that we humans have a saying, time spent in medical is time not spent fighting. But proper healing takes time." Zex protested. "You can't simply burn a wound closed and return to combat." "Actually, we can," Ortega interjected. "We've been doing it for centuries. Our bodies are pretty good at patching themselves up if you give them a kickstart." Zex's medical training battled with the evidence before him. "Where is Jenkins now?" he asked, fearing the worst. Rodriguez pointed toward the door. "Already back at his post. Said to thank you for the heal patches. Works better than the stuff we brought." The medical officer staggered to his feet, all 6 limbs trembling with indignation. "This is unacceptable. I must examine him immediately. Plasma wounds require proper sterilization, tissue regeneration, neural pathway." "Medical officer," Commander Zex'Tral interrupted. "The humans have assured me that Soldier Jenkins will return for a full examination after his shift. For now, we must respect their cultural practices." The humans nodded appreciatively. "Besides," added the third human, whose name tag read Cooper, "you should see what we do when we run out of cauterizers." Zex didn't want to ask. Every medical instinct told him not to ask, but his scientific curiosity betrayed him. What do you do?" Cooper grinned, that disturbing teeth baring again. "Gunpowder from a bullet cartridge. Sprinkle it on the wound, light it up. Burns it closed real nice." Zex felt his primary stomach lurch. "Dig it. That's resourceful," Commander Zex'Tral supplied diplomatically. "Effective," Rodriguez added. "Insanity," Zex concluded weakly. As if the universe had a cruel sense of timing, the medical bay doors hissed open again. 2 more humans stumbled in, supporting each other. One had what appeared to be shrapnel embedded in his leg, while the other sported a nasty gash across his forehead. "Hey, Doc," called the one with the head wound, blood trickling down his face. "Got any of that super glue stuff? This cut's dripping in my eyes and I can't aim for shit." "Super glue?" Zex repeated faintly. "Yeah, you know, that sticky stuff you gave Martinez last week for his finger. Works great for sealing cuts." Zex turned to Nix, who was frantically searching through supplies. "They're referring to the medical adhesive designed for non-critical dermal lacerations," the arachnoid clicked nervously. "I know what they mean," Zex snapped. "But that's not designed for cranial wounds. He needs proper neural scanning, potential decontamination protocols, and—" The human with the leg full of shrapnel interrupted. "While you're at it, got any pliers? Need to yank this metal out before it rusts." Medical Officer Zex'Tral looked helplessly at his commander, who simply gave the Praxian equivalent of a shrug, a subtle elevation of his upper respiratory sacs. "Welcome to interspecies cooperation, Medical Officer," Zex'Tral said quietly. "I suggest you adapt. Quickly." Zex watched in mute horror as Nix handed the head wound human a tube of medical adhesive. The human promptly squeezed a line of it directly across his bleeding forehead, pressed the wound closed with his fingers, and held it for a few seconds. "Perfect," he declared, wiping away the excess blood with his sleeve. "Very good as new." It was going to be a very long war. By the end of the week, Zex had developed an eye twitch in his third optical receptor, a condition previously unheard of in Praxian physiology. His medical logs now contained an ever-growing section labeled Human Medical Aberrations, which he updated with increasing frequency and decreasing professionalism. Day 5. He dictated to his personal recorder, observed human Private Dawson reattach partially severed digit using primitive stitching technique and what they refer to as dental floss. When offered proper microsurgery, subject declined, stating they didn't have time for that fancy stuff. Subject returned to combat duty approximately 15 minutes later. He paused the recording to massage his eye stalks. Day 5. Addendum, he continued. Human Sergeant Rodriguez entered medical bay requesting caffeine pills to stay awake for third consecutive shift. When advised of dangerous physiological effects, subject laughed and consumed substance known as energy drink, which apparently contains similar stimulants along with alarming levels of sugar. Subject's heart rate increased to levels that would indicate imminent cardiac failure in most species. Yet subject reported feeling pretty good and returned to duty. Nick skittered into Zex's office, interrupting his increasingly desperate documentation. "Medical officer, 3 more humans have arrived with injuries from the Sector 7 skirmish," the arachnoid reported, mandibles clicking anxiously. Zex sighed. "Nature of injuries? 1 with apparent concussion, refusing brain scan. 1 with second-degree burns across arm, applying what appears to be cooking grease to affected area. 3rd with... Yes," Zex prompted when Nix faltered. 3rd is apparently dislocated shoulder but is requesting fellow human to just pop it back in rather than proper medical treatment. The medical officer closed all 3 of his eyes briefly, seeking the inner calm his psych training had promised would help in stressful situations. It didn't. "Very well, I'll be right there." He rose from his resting platform. "And prepare the human medical records. I want to review their baseline statistics again. There must be something I'm missing about their physiology." What followed was one of the most educationally horrifying medical shifts of Zex's career. He watched, taking copious notes, as the humans treated their injuries with methods that would have been considered primitive even by their own planet's standards centuries ago. The soldier with the dislocated shoulder, a wiry female named Peterson, grinned as her companion grabbed her arm, and with a sickening pop that made Nix emit a small scream, you wrenched the joint back into its socket. "Thanks, Cooper," she said, rotating the shoulder with only a slight wince. "Very good as new." "That is not good as new," Zex protested. "You've likely damaged the surrounding tissues, possibly torn ligaments, and—" "Feels fine to me, Doc," Peterson interrupted, already reaching for her combat vest. "Besides, this ain't my first rodeo." "I don't know what a rodeo is, but I assure you, proper medical procedure for a dislocated joint involves—" "With all due respect, sir," Cooper interjected, "we've been fixing each other up like this since basic training. Humans heal pretty quick, especially with those fancy patches you've got." Zex felt something shift in his understanding. Not just frustration at human stubbornness, but genuine curiosity. Could it be that human physiology was actually adapted to these crude but rapid treatments? Or was it something in their psychology, their willingness to endure pain and suboptimal healing if it meant returning to their duties faster? May I ask why?" he finally said, gesturing with all 6 hands in a sign of genuine inquiry. "Why risk further injury or incomplete healing by rushing these procedures?" The humans exchanged glances. "It's time, Doc," said the burn victim, who was wrapping a self-adhering bandage over his greased arm. "Out there, every minute counts. Every human back in the fight might save 10 more lives. But if you injure yourselves further, you'll be of no use to anyone," Zex countered. Peterson shrugged her newly relocated shoulder. "Calculated risk. We know our bodies, know what we can push through. And what happens when you push too far?" Zex asked quietly. The humans fell silent for a moment. Then someone else picks up our gun, Cooper finally said, his usual jovial tone somber. And the mission continues. In that moment, Zex began to understand something profound about humans, something that transcended medical protocols and physiological differences. They weren't just stubborn or ignorant of proper medical care. Their approach to injury and recovery was rooted in something deeper, a collective will to continue fighting no matter the personal cost. It was simultaneously horrifying and fascinating. I would like to learn more, Zex said carefully, about human field medicine. If only to better understand how to treat you when your methods inevitably fail. The humans grinned those teeth again, but this time Zex didn't find it quite so disturbing. "Deal, Doc," said Cooper. "But fair warning, it ain't pretty." "I am beginning to understand that nothing about humans is," Zex replied dryly. The alarms blared throughout the inevitable cooperation with a persistence that made Zex's sensitive auditory membranes vibrate painfully. The ship rocked as another volley of harvester energy weapons found their mark, sending medical instruments clattering to the floor. "All medical personnel, prepare for mass casualties." The commander's voice rang through the comms. "Harvester forces have breached lower decks. Combat in sections 12 through 17. Zex moved with practiced efficiency, despite the fear coursing through his system. 3 weeks of treating human injuries had at least prepared him for rapid response. "Nix, prepare all regeneration chambers," he ordered. "Activate all medical drones and set trauma protocols Alpha through Delta." "Yes, Medical Officer," Nix clicked, already spinning webs to secure loose equipment, a nervous habit that had proven unexpectedly useful during combat situations. The medical bay doors burst open as the first wave of casualties arrived, a mix of Alliance species. Volgorian energy specialists with radiation burns, a krill navigator with crushed lower appendages, 3 Praxians with various wounds. And then came the humans. They streamed in, bloodied and battered, yet somehow still moving under their own power despite injuries that should have rendered them unconscious. More alarming still were the makeshift field treatments already applied, torn uniforms fashioned into tourniquets, emergency stimulant injectors protruding from thighs, and wounds hastily sealed with everything from medical adhesive to what appeared to be melted plastic. "Triage protocols," Zex called out, directing his team. "Stabilize non-humans first, the humans can wait." "LA that," came a firm voice from the doorway. Zex turned to see Captain Reynolds, the human commanding officer of the ship's Marine contingent. Despite a nasty gash across his cheek held closed with what appeared to be Staples' actual metal staples, he stood tall. "Treat those who can return to the fight first," Reynolds continued. "We've got harvesters on 3 decks and not enough personnel to hold them. Captain, with all due respect, many of your soldiers require immediate. What we require is to win this battle, Medical Officer," Reynolds cut him off. "If we don't hold Section 15, the ship's core will be compromised." Another explosion rocked the ship, sending everyone lurching sideways. The lights flickered ominously. "We don't have time for debates," Reynolds said, lowering his voice. "My people know what they need. Work with us, not against us." Zex looked around at the crowded medical bay, at the faces of injured crew members from a dozen different worlds, all fighting the same enemy. Then he looked at the humans, applying their crude but effective field treatments, preparing to return to combat despite injuries that would keep any other species confined to medical care. Something shifted in Zex's medical perspective. "Very well," he said, straightening all 6 limbs in resolve. "Nix, distribute emergency medical kits to all capable humans. Human pattern kits, not standard issue." The human captain nodded in approval. "Cooper Ortega," Zex continued, surprising himself with his decisiveness, "set up a treatment station by the door. Quick patches only cauterize, seal, stimulate, and return to duty." The named humans quickly moved to comply, their expressions showing surprise and respect. "Jenkins," Zex pointed to a human corpsman. "Teach my assistants your field dressing techniques. Now, MD, For the next 2 hours, the medical bay operated unlike any Praxian medical facility ever had in the thousands of years of their spacefaring history. Zex found himself applying techniques that would have gotten his medical license revoked on his homeworld, approving the use of stimulants to keep critically wounded soldiers conscious, sealing gashes with adhesives meant only for minor cuts, and in one particularly desperate case, helping Cooper cauterize a human lieutenant's arterial bleed using a heated blade. "Keep pressure here," he instructed a junior medic treating a Vulgorian with a human-style pressure bandage, then inject one dose of human combat stimulant. "They can tolerate it better than we thought." Across the bay, Jenkins was showing Nix how to create an emergency splint using spare parts from a damaged medical drone. "Then you tighten it until they wince. Then 1 notch more," the human explained. "That'll hold until the fighting's done." Another explosion. Closer this time. The comms crackled to life. "Medical. This is Commander Zex'Tral. Harvesters breaching Section 11. We cannot hold. Prepare to evacuate Medical Bay." Captain Reynolds grabbed a nearby comm unit. "Negative, Commander. My people are coming back online. Hold for 3 more minutes." As if on cue, a group of patched-up humans rose from treatment beds, checking weapons and adjusting hastily applied bandages. "You can't possibly return to combat," Zex protested to the nearest soldier, a female whose name tag read Martinez. Her arm was in a sling made from medical tape and rigid packing material. Martinez checked the charge on her rifle one-handed. "Watch me, Doc." "But your humerus is fractured. I can see the bone misalignment even without a scanner." She grinned that same unsettling human expression that Zex was beginning to recognize as determination rather than madness. "I've still got one good arm to shoot with, don't I?" Besides, she nodded toward the medical adhesive patch visible under her torn sleeve. "That stuff you slapped on there? Best painkiller I've ever had." Before Zex could argue further, Captain Reynolds called out, "Marines, warm up. We're retaking Section 11, then pushing to 15. The injured humans, nearly 20 of them, gathered at the door, weapons ready despite splints, bandages, and freshly sealed wounds. They looked, to Zex's medical eye, like they should all be in regeneration chambers. Instead, they stood tall, eyes clear and focused. "What are our odds, Captain?" asked Cooper, who was sporting a pressure bandage around his torso that was already showing spots of blood seeping through. "Better than the Harvesters," Reynolds replied grimly. He turned to Zex. "Keep patching up whoever comes through that door, Doc. Send them back out if they can hold a weapon." Zex found himself doing something very Praxian. He extended a primary hand and grasped the human captain's forearm in the human gesture of solidarity. "Fight well," he said simply, "and try not to undo all my medical work." Reynolds' mouth curved upward. "No promises, Doc." As the humans filed out, Zex turned back to his medical team, who stared at him in various states of shock and awe. "Well," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "You heard the captain. We have patience to prepare for battle." 3 days after what ship records now officially called the mid-space ambush, but what the humans casually referred to as that time we kicked Harvester ass, Zex found himself updating the Alliance Medical Protocols database with a new section, Human Emergency Field Treatments, Approved Applications for Non-Human Species. Commander Zex'Tral stood nearby, watching with an expression that hovered between fascination and concern as Zex dictated his findings. Cauterization techniques using heat sources rated no higher than 300 standard degrees may be applied to Vulgorian, human, and Terralian species in emergency situations. Zex continued, his voice clinical despite the revolutionary nature of his recommendations. "Real and improvised. Praxian physiology responds poorly to direct cauterization, but it can tolerate the application of human superglue medical adhesive for wounds not exceeding 4 centimeters in depth." "Medical officer," the commander interrupted, his skin rippling with the pattern that indicated deep concern. "Are you certain about these recommendations?" "The medical council will require extensive justification." Zex paused his dictation, all 3 of his eyes focusing on his superior. "Commander, what I witnessed during the ambush has forced me to reconsider many of my most fundamental medical assumptions," he said carefully. Human field medicine, while crude and often alarmingly painful, demonstrated a 78% efficacy rate in returning wounded personnel to functional status within an hour of injury. But at what cost to their long-term health? Zex'Tral countered. That, Zex admitted, remains to be determined. However, as Captain Reynolds pointed out rather colorfully, long-term health concerns are moot if we all end up dead today. The door to the medical office slid open, revealing Jenkins, the very human whose self-cauterization had first shocked Zex into unconsciousness weeks earlier. His shoulder, once sporting a horrific plasma wound, now showed only a puckered scar visible above his uniform collar. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything important," Jenkins said cheerfully. "Just coming in for that follow-up you insisted on, Doc." "Perfect timing," Zex replied, gesturing to an examination table with 3 of his limbs while continuing to type with the others. "Commander Zex'Tral and I were just discussing the efficacy of human field medicine." Jenkins hopped onto the table with the boundless energy that seemed characteristic of his species. "Saved our asses in Section 15, that's for sure. Never seen a krill move so fast after taking plasma fire." "What did you give them?" "Some of our stims? Modified human combat stimulants adjusted for krill biochemistry," Zex confirmed, running a scanner over Jenkins' shoulder, "along with pressure bandages and, yes, thermal cauterization for the more severe wounds." Commander Zex'Tral's breathing slits dilated in surprise. "You used human medical techniques on Alliance personnel?" "I used effective medical techniques on Alliance personnel," Zex corrected, studying the scanner results. "Fascinating. Jenkins, your wound is healed at approximately 1.7 times the rate predicted by our medical database." Jenkins shrugged, an action that would have been impossible with such an injury in most species without months of therapy. "Told you we bounce back quick. It's what humans do." "Indeed," Zex murmured, making additional notes. "The capacity of human tissue to regenerate after crude emergency treatment defies conventional xenobiological models. I've been analyzing your cellular structure, and there appears to be an accelerated inflammatory response when tissue undergoes traumatic sealing procedures like cauterization." "In normal people speak, Doc?" Jenkins prompted with a grin. "Your bodies actually heal faster after you abuse them with your primitive field medicine," Zex translated dryly. "It's as if human physiology evolved expecting rough treatment." "Makes sense," Jenkins replied. "We spent most of our history patching ourselves up with whatever was on hand. Guess our bodies figured out how to work with it." Commander Zex'Tral's skin had shifted to the pale blue that indicated deep thought among Praxians. Could this adaptive response be replicated in other species? Zex said, excitement evident in his voice modulation, "is precisely what I've been investigating. Preliminary data suggests that Vulgorians and Terralians show similar, if less pronounced, accelerated healing when treated with modified human techniques. Even more interesting, I've discovered that krill tissue, when exposed to a diluted version of the human adrenaline hormone, demonstrates a 42% increase in regenerative capability." Jenkins whistled. "So basically we're teaching the rest of the Alliance how to be as stubborn about staying alive as humans?" "A crude but essentially accurate assessment," Zex agreed, completing his scan. "You're cleared for full duty, by the way. The scar tissue has integrated remarkably well with the surrounding muscle structure." As Jenkins hopped off the table, Captain Reynolds entered the medical office, followed by Rodriguez and Cooper. All 3 sported visible evidence of recently healed wounds. Reynolds' cheek staples had been removed, leaving a neat line of small scars. "Doc," Reynolds nodded in greeting. "Heard you've been revolutionizing Alliance medical protocols with our barbaric methods." "I prefer the term pragmatically adapting proven field techniques," Zex replied. "It sounds more professional in the official documentation." The humans all laughed, a sound that no longer set Zex's nerves on edge. "I owe all of you an apology," the medical officer continued, his tone serious. "I dismissed your methods as primitive and dangerous without considering their contextual efficacy." "A fancy way of saying you thought we were crazy until you saw it work," Cooper translated with a grin. "Precisely," Zex acknowledged. In return for sharing your field techniques, I'd like to offer some refinements that might improve their efficacy while reducing long-term complications. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. You mean like those pain-blocking patches? Because those are amazing. Kept me fighting with 3 broken ribs. Among other innovations, Zex confirmed, I believe we can create a hybrid approach that combines human resilience with Alliance medical technology. The best of both worlds, as you might say. Captain Reynolds extended his hand, and Zex had learned enough about humans to know to grasp it firmly. Sounds like the beginning of a beautiful friendship, Doc, Reynolds said. Indeed, Zex replied, finding himself actually enjoying the strange human contact ritual. Though I do have one condition. Name it. No more cauterizing wounds with gunpowder. Ever. I have standards. 6 months later, the inevitable cooperation hung in orbit above a liberated former Harvester stronghold. On the planet below, Alliance forces were mopping up the last pockets of resistance, while the ship underwent repairs from the final battle that had secured the victory. Medical Bay 3, now officially designated the Rapid Response Treatment Center but nicknamed Patch N-Go by the human contingent, hummed with activity. Not from treating casualties, but from the training session taking place inside. Zex stood before a mixed group of Alliance medical personnel, demonstrating the proper application of what had become known as a Jenkins patch, a synthetic adhesive bandage infused with human-derived coagulants, regenerative compounds, and targeted painkillers. Apply with firm pressure, he instructed, using all 6 hands to demonstrate on a medical dummy. Ensure full contact with the wound edges. The embedded sensors will automatically dispense the appropriate medication cocktail based on the patient's species. In the back of the room, Jenkins himself leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his chest with evident pride. Beside him stood Commander Zex'Tral, watching the proceedings with the Praxian equivalent of amazement. When I first observed humans cauterizing their own wounds, Zex continued, I believed I was witnessing medical barbarism of the highest order. This earned chuckles from the human medics in the audience. Instead, I was observing the first step in what has become a revolutionary approach to battlefield medicine across the Alliance. The door to the training room slid open, and Captain Reynolds entered, followed by an imposing figure that caused a ripple of murmurs through the assembled medics. Fleet Admiral Zex'Tral, Supreme Commander of the Alliance forces in this sector, ducked his massive krill head to clear the doorway. All 8 of his compound eyes swept the room as personnel scrambled to attention. At ease, the Admiral rumbled, his translator giving his clicks and whistles a deep, authoritative tone. Continue your demonstration, Medical Officer Zex'Tral. I'm here to observe. Zex straightened all 6 limbs in surprise but quickly regained his composure. Of course, Admiral. We were just discussing the implementation of human-inspired field medicine techniques across Alliance forces. Indeed, Zex'Tral said, moving to stand beside Commander Zex'Tral. The battle reports from recent engagements are most impressive. Casualty rates down 34%, return-to-duty speeds increased by 61%. The combination of human resilience with Alliance medical technology has proven quite effective, Zex agreed, pride evident in his voice modulation. Admiral Zex's mandibles clicked in what those familiar with krill expressions recognized as amusement. Especially impressive considering the initial reception to human medical practices. I believe your first official report described them as horrifying acts of self-mutilation that defy all rational medical protocols. Jenkins grinned at Zex, who had the grace to display the Praxian equivalent of embarrassment, a subtle shimmer of his silvery skin. My assessment has evolved with additional data, Admiral, Zex replied diplomatically. As has the entire Alliance approach to combat medicine, Zex acknowledged. Which brings me to my purpose here today. The Admiral reached into a pouch at his side and withdrew a small object, which he held up for all to see, a metallic emblem in the shape of intertwined medical symbols from various Alliance species, with the human caduceus prominently featured. The Alliance High Command has approved the formation of a new special medical unit, Zex announced. The Rapid Intervention Medical Corps, dedicated to the development and implementation of the techniques pioneered aboard this vessel. A murmur of excitement ran through the assembled medics. Medical Officer Zex'Tral, the Admiral continued, you are hereby promoted to Director of the new Corps, with authority to select personnel and establish training protocols across the fleet. Zex stood frozen in shock. All three of his eyes widened to their maximum aperture. I am honored, Admiral, he finally managed, his voice modulator struggling to maintain a professional tone. Select your team, Corzax instructed. You'll have a dedicated research vessel and unlimited access to Alliance medical resources. As the Admiral turned to leave, he paused beside Jenkins. Soldier, he said, your name has become synonymous with a certain style of field medicine throughout the Alliance. Jenkins straightened to attention. Just doing what humans do best, sir. From improvising when things go sideways. Indeed, the Admiral clicked, mandibles twitching in what might have been a smile. I experienced your namesake patch personally during the ground assault last week. You did? Jenkins looked surprised. Yes. Took shrapnel to my third breathing sac. One of your medics applied what they called a Jenkins special and ordered me back to the command position. The Admiral's compound eyes gleamed. Most beings in this galaxy would not dare give orders to an Alliance Admiral. The room had gone deathly silent, every eye fixed on the massive krill and the comparatively small human. Permission to speak freely, sir? Jenkins asked. Granted. In a combat situation, rank doesn't matter as much as keeping fighters in the fight, Jenkins said simply. Human medics learn that pretty quick. Admiral Corzax studied Jenkins for a long moment, then did something that caused gasps throughout the room. He reached up and detached one of the honor medals from his carapace, a krill tradition normally reserved for recognizing members of their own species. Your wisdom has saved many lives, human, the Admiral said, pressing the medal into Jenkins' hand, including my own. As the Admiral departed, the room erupted in excited chatter. Captain Reynolds clapped Jenkins on the back, while Rodriguez and Cooper appeared, seemingly materializing from nowhere to congratulate their comrade. Zex made his way through the crowd to the group of humans who had, against all medical probability, revolutionized Alliance battlefield medicine. It appears, he said dryly, that my initial diagnosis of human medical practices as primitive barbarism may have been somewhat premature. Jenkins grinned. You could just say I was wrong, you know. I believe I did, using the precise medical terminology appropriate for the situation, Zex replied, all three eyes blinking in sequence, the Praxian equivalent of a wink. Rodriguez nudged Jenkins. Who would have thought your habit of setting yourself on fire would make you famous across the galaxy? Not just famous, Cooper chimed in, examining the krill honor medal. This thing's made of crystallized methane compounds, worth about 6 months' salary on any Alliance world. Captain Reynolds cleared her throat. Perhaps we should focus on the significance of the honor rather than its market value, Specialist Cooper. Yes, ma, I am, Cooper replied without an ounce of repentance. Absolutely priceless in terms of, cultural significance. Zex flexed his 6 limbs thoughtfully. I have been authorized to select my team for the new Medical Corps. I would be appreciative if certain human personnel would consider joining the initiative. Jenkins exchanged glances with his fellow humans. You asking us to join your fancy new med team, Zex? I believe that was implied in my statement, Zex responded, his skin taking on the subtle silver-blue tint that humans had learned meant he was feeling hopeful. Well, Jenkins said, pretending to consider the offer carefully, I don't know. What do you think, Captain? Reynolds smiled. I think it's a remarkable opportunity, Specialist Jenkins, though I'll be sorry to lose some of my best field medics. Oh, you won't be losing them, Captain, came Commander Voxtrell's voice as he stepped forward. The inevitable cooperation has been designated as the primary field testing vessel for all new medical protocols developed by the Corps. Translation? We're the guinea pigs, Rodriguez muttered, though not quietly enough. Voxtrell's head tilted in confusion. I am unfamiliar with this Earth rodent's relevance to medical testing. Just a human expression, Commander Jenkins explained. It means we're looking forward to helping test all of Zex's wild new ideas. Some of which, Zex added pointedly, will no doubt incorporate the uniquely human approach of winging it while on fire. The room erupted in laughter, human chuckles mixing with the various sounds of amusement from a dozen different Alliance species. As the merriment subsided, Jenkins looked around at the diverse gathering of beings who had once viewed humans with suspicion and fear. Now they were united not just as allies, but as something closer to friends. "So," he said, clapping Zex on what approximated a shoulder, "when do we start teaching the galaxy that sometimes the best medicine involves a little controlled trauma?" "Immediately," Zex replied. "Though I would prefer if we rebranded as tactical biological intervention in the official documentation." "Whatever you want to call it," Jenkins said, "as long as it keeps more fighters in the fight." Commander Zex'Tral made the Praxian gesture of formal recognition, a sweeping motion with all four arms. "The Harvesters believed they could divide us by exploiting our differences. Instead, those very differences have become our greatest strength." "Indeed," Captain Reynolds agreed. "Though I must admit, I never imagined human emergency field medicine would become our secret weapon." Jenkins shrugged. "Humans have always been good at turning desperate measures into standard operating procedure. It's kind of our thing." As the gathering dispersed and plans for the new medical course took shape, Jenkins found himself standing next to Zex at the viewport, looking down at the liberated planet below. "You know," Jenkins said quietly, "when I first got assigned to this ship, I was sure I'd made some terrible career mistake." Zex's skin rippled with subtle patterns, a sign of thoughtful reflection. "And now?" Jenkins touched the Krill honor medal in his pocket and smiled. "Now I think getting set on fire might have been the best thing that ever happened to me." "To the Alliance as well," Zex added. "Though perhaps we should not include that specific sentiment in the training manual." "Probably for the best," Jenkins agreed. "Save it for the advanced courses." As the inevitable cooperation prepared for its next mission, the unusual friendship between a human field medic and a six-armed alien doctor stood as testament to the Alliance's new philosophy: that their greatest strength lay not in erasing their differences, but in embracing them. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Harvesters were about to discover just how formidable an alliance could be when human ingenuity combined with alien technology, especially when it came to patching up soldiers and getting them back into the fight. Because if there was one thing the galaxy was learning quickly, it was that humans didn't stay down for long, and now, neither would anyone fighting alongside them.